right.
Well, it's 6:30, and to be respectful of everybody's time, I think we'll begin, and hopefully Dr. Kingston will join shortly. If not, Peggy, you can kind of change the order of the speakers.
Sure. That sounds
Okay.
good.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, good evening and welcome. Gail Barron. I co-chair Community Board 8's Women and Families Committee with Peggy Price. Tonight's forum on Social Security addresses critical issues that impact Social Security not only for retirees, but those who will join the system in the future. Social Security faces several challenges, including long-term funding issues, an aging population, and potential cuts to benefits. We're so fortunate to have an outstanding panel this evening, and they're going to address these issues. And I'd also be very remiss if I didn't note that one of our speakers, Beth Finkel, is a former Community Board 8 board member. So we're delighted, particularly that you're here, Beth. Jordan, would you please cover housekeeping issues for attendees, after
Yes.
which Peggy will move forward with the program.
Yes. Welcome. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you will notice that you are currently muted and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except the committee co-chairs, Peggy and Gail, and any presenters as we move through the agenda. Following the presentations, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the react icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in on the phone, it is *+9 to raise your hand and *+6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participants section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support.
Peggy?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this program sponsored by Community Board 8's Women and Families and Health, Seniors and Social Services Committee. Tonight, we're diving into retirement funding. We'll begin with Social Security, the program that is now or will be the financial cornerstone of our retirement. This year, almost 55 million retirees and their families will get a monthly Social Security payment, but alarm bells have been sounding. Many of us were already worried about the long-term viability of Social Security before this year's siege, coming out of Washington. Now many are wondering not just whether Social Security will remain solvent, but also how to get the services they need right now. In this environment, personal savings become an even more critical addition to Social Security. But how much should we save for what could be a long retirement? Tonight, our stellar panel will address these issues and answer your questions. Speakers include Dr. Eric Kingston and Beth Finkel, who will address Social Security, and William Bader and Jeffrey Levy, who will focus on personal saving and investments. Dr. Kingston is a professor emeritus at Syracuse University's School of Social Work and co-founder and board chair of Social Security Works, the organization that launched and staffed the Strengthen Social Security Coalition. Our second speaker, Beth Finkel, is the New York State Director of AARP. William Bader is an attorney, CPA, and author of the new book, Optimize Your 401k. He'll address personal finance before retirement, while financial advisor Jeffrey Levy, who is founder and president of Harlan Financial Services Corp., will guide us on post-retirement saving and investments. We'll be taking questions after all presentations are completed. We have a lot to get to, so let's start right now with Eric Kingson, Board Chair of Social Security Works. Is Dr. Kingston here? Is
May
Dr.
not have joined
Doc-
you, Peggy. I don't see that he's on board.
I
Okay.
don't see him.
Okay, well, let's then start with Beth Finkel, who is Director of AARP for New York State. Beth?
Hi, sorry. Hi, folks. So, yes, I live in Community Board 8. I have for almost 50 years. I can't believe I'm saying that. And I was really pleased to be invited to this, and thank you to Gail. Our paths have crossed professionally over the years, so I was very happy to get this invitation. So I don't think I need to introduce AARP to you, but just roughly, I will just let you know, and I think you know this, ARP. Oh, hi, Eric. You did make it on. Okay, nice to see you. So ARP has almost over 37 million members across the country. And here in New York State, we have over 2.25 million members. And the reason I'm telling you that is because that's the power that AARP has to influence the government, and particularly in looking at these times when we're all concerned about Social Security, and for good reason. And as I think Gail mentioned previously, there was concern about Social Security before this. I know Eric is probably going to go into the whole history. He knows it better than anybody of Social Security and why we are where we are right now. But suffice it to say that if something is not done by 2034 to shore up Social Security, it will have to pay out only 80% of what technically should be paid out to the beneficiaries. And I just want to highlight that word beneficiaries, because this is not about entitlement. This is about, we have all paid in. I don't know about the rest of you, but I started paying in at 16. I got a lot of years that I paid into Social Security. I earned it. You earned it. Probably like my children have earned it. And one day my grandchildren will. And so it's really important for all of us to make sure that Social Security is taken care of. So I'm just going to move a little bit into the ARP pieces of this, which you know, Social Security is literally, and Medicare are the two most important issues that AARP works. And we work on so many other things. And I know that this is the Committee for Family and Children. So we work on SNAP benefits and all sorts of different things that I know affect the people that you're concerned about. But I'm just going to focus on the Social Security and just touch on Medicare. So in 90 years, Social Security has never missed a payment. And today, 14% of Americans that are 65 plus rely on Social Security for most of their income. Well, that means 90%. And another 40% of them rely upon it for more than half of their income. And if you like, I also have the New York State numbers, but I think you're getting the general gist of why it is the bedrock of everyone's retirement, unless you are super, super wealthy. So if not for Social Security, millions of Americans of all ages would find themselves homeless, hungry, or barely able to make ends meet. And some of you may be like me and remember childhoods. I had innumerable friends whose grandmothers or grandfathers, mostly grandmothers, shared rooms with them because they really couldn't afford to pay for their own home any longer, because Social Security was not in existence in those early years. And I don't think any of us want to go back to those old days, as nice as it is to be close to our family. So this is an exciting time because America is marking Social Security's 90th anniversary. And so we are going to be doing celebrations all across the country. And please go to AARP.org/. New York, and you can see all about all of the activities that we're going to be doing. But in the meantime, I just want to talk to you about the recent threats that I think that we've been feeling, that we've been concerned about. It's one of the reasons why I'm so proud to be working for ARP. I've been working for them for almost 30 years, 29 years. And these are the moments that make me most proud of all. So when the federal government tried to close down the not close down the calling, make the calling center less efficient, and they were not going to allow people to recertify themselves for Social Security or to certify to begin with, that they would have to actually go in person to a bricks and mortar Social Security site. Now, that might be fine for the everyday person, but if you're working and you need to take time off from work to do that and wait in long lines, or if you are disabled or isolated and can't get out or no one to drive you, and if you don't have a Social Security office nearby, then that becomes an overwhelming burden. And it's no joke if you get decertified and you have to figure out how to get yourself back on. It is no fun at all. So ARP mobilized over 4 million people across this country who took action to make sure that that was not going to happen. I'm incredibly proud of that. And so they put the phone lines back on to be able to take care of certification, which is really important. That doesn't mean the fight is over. 7,000 people were going to be losing their jobs in Social Security. You cannot have the same customer service. And by the way, their customer service has not been great for a lot of years, and ARP has been working on that for many, many years, because wait times could be 3 or 4 hours to get somebody on the telephone, which is absolutely unconscionable. So whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, the most important thing to understand is that this is not a partisan issue. This is the bedrock of what it is to be an American. We should be incredibly proud of Social Security and Medicare, because they are the hallmarks of what makes America great, and they are so embedded at American institutions. So it's really, really important that that they understand that. And at the same time, they have to understand that it resonates. It resonates with everyone. It doesn't matter if you're far right, you're far left. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. It doesn't matter whatever you are. Social Security is the bedrock of what makes Americans' retirement system work. And so we just all have to get really, really engaged and make sure that we don't allow that to happen. I suspect that since you all are on this call, many of you are activists and you're staying informed, or you wouldn't be on this call to begin with. So I hope that you are calling your Congress members, assuming you are. Probably if you are living in Manhattan, your Congress members are pretty firmly fighting on the Social Security issue. And there are many others that you could be calling, or having your friends and relatives across the country also make sure that they call. Just quick, two more numbers. There are nearly 69 million older Americans, 69 million, that are receiving Social Security. And over 183 million workers are paying into the system. And as I said before, Social Security has never missed a payment. Let's not let that happen under our watch. Okay, so I think I'm going to cut back to Eric, and I'm happy to answer more questions, but Eric really is the expert on Social Security, and I don't want to end up jumping into his presentation, which I know is going to be great, but I'm happy to come back more and add more later. Okay.
Thank you very much. That was terrific. And now let's hear from Dr. Kingston. He is the board chair of Social Security Works. Eric?
Yes, I was trying to put up a few charts. If I could just share. Can you hear me?
Yes. we
Okay.
can.
First, if you could give me the capacity to share.
Yes, you should be good to go now.
Okay, great. Then I can get this right up. Okay, are we there?
We are.
Yes.
And so, by the way, I apologize. I was having a lot of trouble getting on. So I'm now here. And Beth, I really appreciate what you said and how you said it as well. I'm going to say a few things. Peggy asked me to give a little bit of background, so I put them into charts to make a few points, and I'm not going to spend 1,000 hours on these charts, but I want to just make a couple of points from them. We have a population 65 and over, to use that number, and aging, we could talk 62, we could talk 70, whatever, but we're projecting a population of older Americans 65 and over going from about 58 million in 2022 all the way up to 106 million in 2100. It's based on the actuaries' assessments at Social Security, the projections. So that's a significant increase. I didn't do the math, but I imagine it's close to a 40% increase in the numbers of people, more like 45%. We have a Social Security system, which we often talk about as the combined Social Security, the combined old age survivors and disability insurance program. There's DI and there's OASI, but effectively for financing and for the concern of the public, they're the same, they're connected, obviously. So looking at the cost of Social Security going forward, today we're spending roughly 5.2% of gross domestic product. 5.2% of everything we produce in the course of a year is what we expend on the Social Security system. That's projected to peak right around, all of us baby boomers. I'm one of the lead ones. I was born in 1946, just celebrated my 79th birthday. But as we move forward, it's projected to peak at about 6.4% going forward. And I'm using last year's data, but it doesn't change that much. And then it declines to 6.1% of Social Security. So you can see the chart. It's not a flat line, but it's going from 4.8 actually right now, I guess. I don't remember. And it's going up to about 6.1% and at max up to about 6.4%. I mention that because think about what we get for this, and also wanted to point out something about so we have a modest increase in the cost of Social Security, 1% of taxable payroll plus a small debt fraction. Take a look at the increase in the numbers of people over age 65. And I put this together because I think it does tell a story. Again, it's the same story. Large numbers of people are moving into retirement, what we call retirement ages. If we look at today, 58, 60 million people, 59 over age 65. And that peaks when folks like me are 104 years old with 79 million people who are 65 and over. And it bounces up, and just a few years later, when all folks like me, even my younger brothers and sisters, are dead, most likely, except for those of us who live to 150, because some of us we know will collect benefits forever, right? But so the numbers keep going up, and very significantly, the number of people, but the cost of Social Security remains, and this is the main point I wanted to make with these charts, it's fairly flat. In spite of all the fear mongering we hear about, all the worrying about its financing, it's quite flat. So I want to make the point that what we think about Social Security financing isn't necessarily the way it is. There are things that could be done with the projection of a shortfall running around 3.5–4% of payroll. That could be addressed by treating Social Security's payroll contributions as taxable for people who earn above a $400,000 income. If you do that, you address roughly 2/3, 60%, 70 of the projected shortfall. If you count assets as income for Social Security purposes, just as an example, if you count assets, you may even have a little bit left over to do some positive changes, small, modest changes like strengthen the cost of living adjustment so it reflects the needs of older people, people with disabilities better. So that's a part of the story. And I'm going to come back, I have a harder part to tell you after this, which is that one thing I just want to emphasize is we have in this country, we don't have a Social Security crisis. We have a retirement income crisis, which I'm sure the other speakers will speak about. I pulled these charts off of the National Institute of Retirement Security. And what it basically shows you is very few people have, or relatively few people have assets in a retirement account. Some do, but the amount is so small. And I'll rely on the two people who are speaking from the point of view of 501 401ks. If you look at who benefits from that, just a simple one, the top 25% receive my eyes ain't what they used to be. About 88%, 89% of the benefits of the 401ks go to them. You get down to the, call it modest middle class, it's about 49%, that is 51% have coverage under a different retirement savings. And you go down to the last quartile, it's only a quarter. The point to be made here for me is, yes, it's important to save. We all like to be able to do it, but we can't always do it. And many people cannot save sufficiently. And I'll make the point, nobody is going to save their way out of the retirement income crisis. We have data telling us, and this is repeated in the report that I think Beth was involved with, we have data telling us that about 50% of working Americans today will not be able to maintain their standard of living in retirement. That assumes that they convert their homes, if they have equity, to a stream of income, that they work until age 65. So 50% can't. If you count healthcare and long-term care, it's 2/3 of working Americans. So we face a huge retirement income crisis. We don't face a face a Social Security financing crisis only if we want to create it, as we create it. We want to frame it that way. It's not a huge system. It's obviously huge system, but it's not a huge expense relative to what we produce. We're the richest country in the world at fairly rich, the richest time of the world's history. We can afford this, and we can even afford, and I come down on the side, we need to expand it, especially for persons who, caregivers, persons who are physically disabled and have long waiting periods, variety of things we could be doing. So that's sort of the general point. And I'll just put this out here, say, the so-called big perfect bill or big beautiful bill will increase, depending on which data you're using. This comes from the congressional budget. This comes actually from the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget, which I generally am not on the same page with, but they're showing that the bill that's passed is going to expand the debt very significantly. We have lots of money to do these things, making the tax benefits permanent from the past, which the first Trump administration did, is going to be even more costly. So that's the general point. That's the sort of one point, the boring factual points. I want to suggest a few things. Firstly, we are in the worst crisis of Social Security's 90-year history. I've worked on Social Security for 50 years, starting with my dissertation studies. And I've been an advocate as well as a scholar and writer, whatever, teacher. I've always tried to avoid scaring people, especially seniors. But the reality is everyone should be scared today. The destruction of Social Security the potential destruction of Social Security has been put in place by the DOGE changes, by the complete lack of regard for the system, in spite of having a national leader who says he will not touch Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid. We know otherwise. But the thing that it's doing, which one of the things that Social Security is supposed to do, is to give us a sense of security. We have a base protection, and they're stripping that away from people. You've all spoken with older people who are worried. We know that we have a higher rate of applications for Social Security benefits today because a lot of older people are scared, and people with disabilities, but they don't want to risk not getting their benefit. And for the first time, it's possible that benefits will be delayed or other things as well. And I say that as should have introduced I was staff to the 1983 Social Security Commission that Alan Greenspan chaired. There was a real crisis there. If Congress didn't do anything by 1982 commission, if it didn't have anything in place by early March or April, Social Security would have had to reduce benefits for everybody. Now, no one in Congress wants to be around when the benefits are reduced, obviously. And basically, there was a process which was bipartisan, a lot of arguing, but a process developed, and the commission made some recommendations. Congress took a lot of it. And the reason was we had a real crisis. It was in the short term. It's not this long-term worry, which we obviously have to deal with, but the short term is what was so worrisome to the public and members of Congress, and it's what we all learned to meet and love. Claude Pepper and a variety of other people stood up for it. So Congress will act if we still have a Congress. And I say that look, I'm going to say this respectfully. I know there'll be people who disagree. I happen to fall in the category of people who are unreconstructed liberals. I started in the civil rights movement in the 60s and have been involved ever since then. And yeah, I lean right, but I really miss the Republicans I used to know or know of, like Bob Dole, like John McCain. We all miss him. There was a capacity to discuss things. We may not like everything. We no longer have that. What we have to do, in my mind, to my way of thinking, is we have to get as many people out protesting, writing letters to the editors, writing letters to their members of Congress, their members of the Senate, calling them. And we're doing it, not ourselves, those of us, I'm 79. It's not going to affect me that much, except for my heart. But it is critical that we're out there, those of us who are older, protecting the system for our children and grandchildren. They are basically, there's a cruelty that's afoot in our country right now, and the president is emblematic of it, in my opinion, strongly emblematic of it. And they seem to get joy in the way they've done things. They've done everything they could do to undermine the administration of Social Security, including taking a lot of the IT people who are responsible for keeping the system together. It's an old program, COBOL, and there are not a lot of people who know it, but they had some at SSA. Some of them are line workers because they shifted them out of doing the work on computers, and they finally got someone who knew the system very well, because mainly you have to find older people to work with the system. And they were immediately put into a different position. The research setting and the research at Social Security has been dismembered. It's basically now a see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil frame of research. We need to know who's receiving benefits, what benefits aren't doing, how Americans are being affected. And the disrespect to older people and people with disabilities is extraordinary. And they go back and forth. And one thing we can see, pushback works. What AARP has done works with an organization I co-founded called Social Security Works, and which has a coalition of, we say several hundred groups, but it's really active. So anyway, it's a very important organization, but not every group is super active. We have about 30, 35 very active groups around the unions, some of the aging groups, some of the disability, a religious group, but they're out there pushing, working with AARP and other groups too. This is a time where we have to put a lot of emphasis into protecting this system, protecting it and protecting ourselves, but also the ones who follow. I'll stop and I'll come back to when we have discussion. I love the system. The best way to say it, my dissertation was about retirement age policy in 1979. I think it's the best thing, one of the very best things our country has done. It's something that connects all of us. Beth made that a point. We're living in a time where our country is being torn apart systematically and purposefully by its leadership. Again, my opinion, but it's a very strong one. I'll be out tomorrow on Saturday with probably 5 million Americans, but we have an administration that is pulling apart the fabric of our society, encouraging it. And Social Security is a core piece because, as Beth says, it doesn't matter if you're a Trump voter, if you are a independent, a Bernie Sanders voter, President Biden voter, everyone agrees they don't want this program cut. You get about 90% of Democrats saying, don't touch it. Most of them are, and you get about 84%, and Beth may have the more recent numbers, but of Republicans saying, don't touch it. And the public is willing to spend more on it. It also is very favorable to scrapping the cap and is even open to some payroll contributions. But the bottom line is there's nothing out there that's going to protect our public. This system has not, as Beth said, ever missed payments. It may miss payments this year, which is terrifying to even think of, to say. The system has been very well administered historically, but it's been starved for resources for administration. I think many of you know a tiny bit over 0.5 percentage point of Social Security revenues is used for the administration of the program. I'll ask my classes how many, 20%, 25%, and then it's a great question. You get down, it's only less than 1%, about 0.5%. So they've starved the administration and now they're undermining the structure of it. And the waiting periods for people with disabilities, the wait on the phone, that's disrespectful. Effectively, Social Security, in theory, is where the public meets the government. We meet it also with the IRS. We tend not to prefer to go into the IRS, but Social Security is in many ways where the rubber meets the road in terms of the citizenry and government. And they're pulling it apart. And there's been a long history of undermining confidence in the system. And I don't want to go, I don't think I put this up here, but there's a long history. But what we have today is another level of undermining of confidence. This isn't even the privatization discussion in 1993, and then again when President Bush decided he wanted to move to privatization. Those were relatively minor compared to what we're looking at today. So I wish I could be more optimistic, except that I can say I believe we can do it. We will do it because I believe we can do it. I won't say I know we will do it, but this is the core mechanism, especially for people who've worked long and hard at low wages and moderate wages. You work long and hard at higher wages, like many of us have done, you get a larger benefit, but you get only about a replacement of maybe 25% of pre-retirement earnings measured in a certain way. You work long and hard at low wages, you get less money, but it replaces about 55% of pre-retirement earnings. It's one of the systems that does adjust for some of the inequities in our society. When those who talk about privatizing it want to take that away, those who talk about the kinds of changes that we'll start hearing again, basically, they just aren't favorable to us. It's a shame. There's this President Eisenhower has this wonderful quote in a letter to, well, I won't find it. I'll just tell you what it is. In a letter to his brother, he writes, there are some people, he begins with, if anyone ever talks about taking away Social Security, farm subsidies, labor protections, you would not hear from that political party again. Well, that's not true today. But he writes, there is no one, people don't do that. But there is a small group like H.L. Hunt, read that as the far right winger of that day, who probably looks like just a right winger today. But H.L. Hunt, and there's a small group of people, some of them like H.L. Hunt, but they are small and they are stupid. This was President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who really was a pretty wonderful president, all things considering, though far from perfect. So let me stop there. I can go on, but I hope that gives, Peggy, I hope that gives some of the data framework you wanted.
Can you just talk for a quick second, though, before you go, about this issue of how what's going on now might affect the long-term solvency of Social Security, or if it does?
Mhm. Well, that's a good question. Thanks. One thing that's going on is pushing hardworking immigrants and asylees and undocumented people too out of the country. Immigrants pay more into Social Security than they receive. That's one impact we're going to have from one of these major issues that are obviously coming up. The long-term worries I have, when you hear the president, he was talking about, let's have a payroll tax holiday. Well, that's a pretty bad idea. And Obama took on that for a short time, but what Obama did was replace the payroll contributions with general revenues. Trump has no idea. So if we have a payroll tax holiday, what we end up doing is putting Social Security further into a bigger shortfall. If we end up allowing seniors, people like us, many of us, which Trump has backed off of, but if the initial proposal was to give a free ride on taxation of benefits, which would be very popular. Problem is, he wasn't going to replace it with any income. It's another example of the willingness to just destroy the structure of the system. You can't do it politically because the population's so positive about it. You try to undermine it. The old strategy was undermine confidence and try to bring about change. This strategy is, undermine confidence, but also undermine the structure of the system and provide opportunity for some other changes that will be massive. Did that answer?
Yeah. And before we move on, do you agree with what the projection is about when full benefits will no longer be payable?
Yes, but it's not basically we run down to about, depends on the numbers you're using, but it's about 81% of everything Americans have earned and deserved will be covered under the best estimates until 2100 and beyond. And The shortfall is real, and we do have to deal with it. The difficulty is politically, from those of us who've been defending the system, the shortfall has been used to bludgeon Social Security and to bludgeon supporters of it in Congress, saying basically the shortfall was used to identify the system as going broke, unable to function. I also served as staff to the Bipartisan Commission on Entitlement and Tax Reform in 1993. And they're the group that, while they didn't get much done, one thing they did do was turn entitlement, a word entitlement, a simple 11-letter word, they turned it into a 4-letter word. And that's part of the messaging that was done. Peggy?
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And now we're going to hear the personal finance side of the picture from William Bader, who is an attorney, CPA, and author of Optimize Your 401k. Bill?
Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate that. And thank you, Dr. Kingston. That was a very enlightening talk. I appreciate that. And it was a great talk. And I learned a great deal about Social Security, which is not my personal expertise. Although I have been a tax lawyer, CPA, for many, many years, I've worked in the private sector. And I guess as an add-on to Dr. Kingston's speech, I will remark that part of the problem here is that private corporations, most of them, have migrated away from what's known as a defined benefit pension plan. And what a defined benefit pension plan did, as opposed to a 401k, it promised the benefit like Social Security at normal retirement age, typically 65. Most large companies have jettisoned these vehicles, which is adding to the retirement problem, income problem, or whatever you want to call it, problem that Dr. Kingston spoke about. So I just wanted to, as a side, mention that that's what's going on in private industry today. And I've helped tons of large Fortune 500 companies, large hospitals, large not-for-profits with their issues, how to protect their fiduciaries, how to protect their plans, how to help participants get a respectable retirement income. Now, most of these for-profit companies and the nonprofit companies are concerned about participants having the wherewithal to retire. And the reason they're concerned about this is they want to have a succession plan for their business. So it's a profit motive, but they want participants to be able to retire gracefully so they can get younger employees in and replace them when they're not able to perform their duties and enable them with dignity. So I've helped companies try to do that. When they've eliminated this defined benefit plan, it made it much, much more difficult to be able to do that. So I will, and now with Social Security issues, people are scared. So that's a backdrop to what I wanted to talk about today. So how do you feel confident about your financial future? I decided to write a book about retirement, 401ks, because I've advised, as I said, all these companies, all these committees, and I do feel that they really, most of them, want their employees, for business reasons, to be able to retire. And they're communicating to employees, trying to get the employees to save, to invest, and so on. And I'm going to talk a little bit about investing, about saving, and about Social Security for timing of Social Security, when you take your payments and how your savings fit in. And I just want to lay everybody's concerns to the side. I will try to keep this a little more fun than the Internal Revenue Code, which I know is a low bar, but I'll try. So we're on slide 3 now, please. So let me start with a quick story about a friend of mine, an old high school buddy. His name is Eric. Eric gave me a call, actually, coincidentally, very recently. Eric's a great guy. He's the kind of guy, though, who once thought a 401k was a highway. He wasn't, to say the least, financially trained at all. So he called me. He was very nervous about his finances and asked me, Bill, am I going to be okay, or will I be eating ramen at 80? So we talked through his finances, his 401k, his other accounts, Social Security, etc. I did some rough calculations on the phone, and I said, listen, Eric, I think you're going to be okay. You've done a reasonable job. You'll be doing what you want in retirement. Don't worry. I think you'll have a secure retirement. So the point is, and he doesn't have much money. He has some money saved, but it wasn't tons. He has what I would consider a very reasonable or modest budget going forward. And so what I'm going to try to project or to help people today feel a little bit more secure about your future, just like Eric. And the key really is to plan properly and plan early if you can do it. And it's not easy. In fact, I have a daughter who is just graduated from grad school and read my book. And like one of the first times she's ever complimented me, she said, Dad, that wasn't bad, that book. So I was dancing in the streets with that comment. Anyway, but she tells me that it's almost impossible for kids to save. And we go back and forth with this. And I tell her, listen, I've interviewed tons of people before finishing this book. I've read stories of people who are able to do this. It is not easy, but it can be done. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But you have to start early. That's one of the critical things. And this even becomes more critical given what Dr. Kingston said and Beth said about Social Security and where we are. So how do you know? One of the things that I was asked to talk about is how do you know when you can retire? So I'm going to talk about a couple of simple rules that I think will help most people with this question, that are simple, which, by the way, enabled me to answer Eric's question very easily without much thought. So the first rule I'd like to discuss is, it's a classic rule known as the 4% rule. And basically, under this rule, you can withdraw 4% of your retirement savings each year for 30 years without running out of money. And you can also get a cost of living increase. So let's say you need $40,000 a year to live in retirement. You've calculated it and you have that budget. So calculating that under the 4% rule, you divide 40,000 by 0.04 and get $1 million. So you need $1 million to generate that income for the rest of your life and be secure under that rule. It's not perfect, but gives you a nice ballpark. And it's held up, this rule, through every market, the Great Depression, the Great Recession, every single market. So if you're getting 15, 20,000, 30,000 from whatever you're getting from Social Security, you'd subtract that from that $40,000 number, and that would bring your bogey, that $1 million bogey, down. So let's say, just as an example, you need 15,000 from Social Security. So now you only need 25,000 to plug that hole only. But you know, that's a big number, but that's your target now goes down to 625,000. And how did I get that number? Well, I took the 25,000 and I divided by 0.04. Now, as I said, the 4% rule also allows for COLA increases. So there's some, I think there's some, yeah, if you start early, there's some opportunity to be able, and a good opportunity if you're willing to sacrifice and be persistent and really care about your finances, depending, of course, on what you're making. But people who are making very, very modest amounts of money, not all of them, some of them are able to do this. Now, a second rule that I'd like to discuss, it's called the 15% rule, and it was developed by Vanguard. And what Vanguard says is save 15% of your salary starting early. Now, that's a hard thing to do. But if your company or your employer, government employer, nonprofit employer, etc., offers a company match, you can reduce that 15% by the company match. Or if they offer another plan, you can reduce that 15%, say, by a 3% contribution that the employer may make, regardless of whether or not you contribute. So let's say your company offers 6% between match and maybe a supplemental contribution, which is a generous match. But a lot of not-for-profit companies offer very generous benefits, more so than for-profit corporations. So if you get the 6%, you subtract that from the 15%, then you need to contribute 9% of your salary to retire in dignity, or in dignity, I mean being able to spend similar to your pre-retirement income when you retire. So in other words, you're not going back to when you were 20. You're going back to, let's say, 65, what you earned in 65, and be able to spend that in retirement. And this rule was developed by Fidelity. And what they say, they also give some ballparks. So you can try to back into this rule, even if you haven't started in your 20s. So what they say is at age 30, you should have 1 times your salary saved. By age 40, they say 3 times your salary saved. 50, age 6 times. And at retirement, you should have 10 times. It's a helpful benchmark to try to get to where you need to go. Again, this is not simple stuff, but it's a benchmark, and it may require a lot of or a significant amount of sacrifice. But as I said, people have gotten there. And by the way, I wrote this book not to make money, not to get clients. I retired, basically. I retired. And so I wrote this book just to help the younger generation be able to retire or have flexibility in their life. So I have no agenda here other than to help people. So that's what I'm trying to do, is get people to save, to live below their means, no matter what they're making, to try to be financially responsible to the best of their abilities. And so the third way that as you get closer and closer to retirement if you want more precision, the third way that I suggest you try to get that precision is they have lots of online retirement calculators that are reasonably priced, that you plug in certain numbers, assumptions, interest rate assumptions, what you think your portfolio might grow at, tax assumptions, etc. And it's a little bit more precise than some of the other methods that I previously mentioned. I think we're up to slide 5, please. So now you've saved, you've tried to do some of the right things, starting at an earlier age. Where do you put that savings? Where should the money go from a macro perspective? So I'm going to talk about 3 options. The first is tax deferred accounts. Actually, I think we're on slide 4. I'm sorry. Tax deferred accounts. So traditional 401ks and IRAs, you save on taxes now, but you'll pay taxes later, and your earnings grow tax deferred. So this particular option is best if your tax rate is lower in retirement than it is today. Why? Because if your taxes are lower in retirement, you want to defer your taxes until retirement and not pay them today. So that's why a 401k, a traditional 401k or IRA would be better for you. Typically, a young employee very early in their career who's making, just starting their career and not making tons of money, that's not the right approach for them. It's better for an executive or somebody that's well into their career, that when they expect taxes to be lower in retirement, to do a traditional contribution and pay and not pay the taxes now, but rather pay them later. A Roth account is exactly the opposite. With a Roth, what you're doing is you're paying taxes immediately. The money is growing tax-free, and the great thing about a Roth is your withdrawals are also tax-free. This option is great if your current tax rate is very low. And some people, younger folks or people who are not making that much money, they're not paying any taxes. So this vehicle is a unbelievable opportunity if they can afford it. You can get a Roth contribution for free. So you put your money into this Roth account, pay no taxes. At an early age, this money will compound yearly for 40 years, and you'll never pay taxes on this again. So that this is a terrific opportunity for people starting out, for people not paying taxes because they're making low incomes, but they have to be able to save a little bit and try to get their money into these kind of accounts. And that's what I'm trying to do with my book, is to educate people so that they can try to do this. The third vehicle are taxable accounts. And under taxable accounts, you get no tax breaks, but full flexibility. So this vehicle is good for saving beyond retirement. So for people who have maxed out either on the Roth or on their 401k, if they can afford it, put in some taxable money, and they have full flexibility, meaning they can take the money out before retirement. Some people, if you want to buy a car or you need some money to repair, this money can be used to help finance your lifestyle. The point here is I wanted to give a flavor of the different vehicles. And like anything else in life, if you have a mix to hedge your bets, gives you full control or better control over your future taxes and will be more flexible in terms of your future circumstances. Slide 6, please. So now you've chosen your vehicles, you've saved, hopefully. How do you invest? And I'm a big proponent of low-cost index funds. And I've met people at the gym, at other places, young folks, and I talk to them about these issues. Some of them actually are very on top of some of this stuff. And what I'm telling them, they understand, but they've heard before. Some of them not so much. But index funds quietly, like a whisper, beat all the experts. And a lot of people that I talk to about this tell me, Bill, I don't like this index stuff. It's boring. I don't want to be average. I want to beat the markets. I want to invest in the next go-go equity and get 50 million times my investment. And I'm like, okay. I say beating the experts is not boring. It's winning. And Morningstar and many other experts back this up. It may be boring, but this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And boring is going to make you rich. It can make you rich if you're willing to save relatively reasonable amounts for most people. $100, $50 a week, something like that will grow exponentially. And when you're 40, in 40 years, you could have millions of dollars saved up just on $100 a week or $400 a month investment. Half of that, maybe you'd have $500,000 in your account. So what is an index fund? An index fund tracks the market like an S&P. An S&P 500 index is a fund that has all of the 500 best or biggest corporations in America in that fund. So what you're doing is you're buying 75% essentially of the American stock market with one investment. So what that does is it gives you broad exposure at very low cost and diversification, which is critical. And the icing on the cake is that these investment vehicles require very little work. And I know most of you have more fun things to do than monitor your investments, read public company 10Ks or proxy materials, by the way, that I used to write that nobody wants to read. And so these investments are self-adjusting. So my advice here is you can do this very simply. Start with 2 funds. The first fund will contain 80% of your portfolio, and I would just suggest put it into an S&P 500 fund. Low cost, fees, very low fees, 0.02%, something in that range, and leave it there. Don't worry about it. Leave it there. The second fund, I put 20 or so percent in an international stock fund to get you some international exposure that's not exposed to U.S. markets. I put 20% into that fund, and I do this personally. So together, these 2 funds will give you very low-cost diversification, very easy, simple. Anybody can do this. As you near retirement, I would add some type of fixed income, a bond fund, not a municipal bond fund in a non-taxable account. You'd want a taxable bond fund. And again, I would do an index bond fund that is very low cost maybe 25% of your portfolio around age 55 or so, which gives you maybe 10 years or so till retirement. Now I'm going to tie it all together with what I was asked to talk about in terms of how does this integrate with Social Security. And this is on slide 7. So if you've saved well, my point here is that you have options. You're not forced to take your Social Security at age 62. Now, Social Security is smaller if you take it earlier rather than later. So if you wait to take Social Security, for example, if you take it at age 62, and I'm just making up numbers here, it might be $1,200 a month. Just assume that away for a moment. But if you're at 63, again, assume this away, it might be $1,250 a month. So delaying increases your benefit. And there's a big increase at later years. It can be as big as 8% for age 67, 68, 60, 70. Those at the latter ages, it exponentially increases. So there is an incentive to delay the Social Security, but you can't do that if you haven't saved, because you may need the money, and so you don't have a choice. The other thing with Social Security is if you're in poor health, you want to take that Social Security early because you want to get the money today rather than maybe not get anything tomorrow or in a year or two. So it's better to start taking, it's a health bet, like all annuities. It's a bet that you're going to live long. And so that's why you want to save as well, because then you can make that bet. If you've taken care of your health, you might want to delay your Social Security, but you can only do that if you have some savings to be able to fall back upon. Again, the key is that it gives you options. The savings gives you options. In terms of we're on slide 8 now. I'm just going to wrap up now with some final thoughts. In terms of savings, if you're younger, I would suggest you try to save 15% of your salary if you can, minus any company contributions. Use a mix of tax-deferred accounts, Roth accounts, taxable accounts. Invest your savings in low-cost index funds. And as you age, consider a bond fund. And use your savings to control your Social Security timing. In addition, those savings can provide a lot of flexibility to folks who are younger. So let's say you don't like your job or you don't like your career and you've saved a little bit. Even if we have a rock solid Social Security system, you can't get that money. There are people who can't stand their jobs, but they're stuck in them. If you're able to save, you can have, saving buys flexibility. And so it's not just about retirement. It's about flexibility and having control of your life. So I'm a big proponent in trying to save. And in fact, on my website, williamabader.com, I even have a calculator where you can calculate how much certain things will, if you avoid them. So say you're spending $5 on a cup of coffee. I'm not suggesting you nickel and dime on everything, but a $5 cup of coffee over 40 years can be $1 million or $2 million in savings. I mean, it's just incredible how exponentially the stock market will grow your savings if you're diligent about it. So use your savings to control Social Security and buy flexibility, and stay consistent. Don't panic. Markets are going to go up and down. You got to stay the course is the point. And if you follow these principles, I firmly believe you're going to be in control, just like my friend Eric. And here's to a future that, on a positive note, you all can feel good about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill. That was terrific. We're going to hear now from Jeffrey Levy, who is founder and president of Harland Financial Services Corp. So, Jeff.
Yes, hi. Good evening. I was requested to talk to you about post-retirement finances. First, specifically, how do individuals make their savings last throughout the rest of their lives? Second, how does this tie into Social Security benefits? And third, what unexpected costs should retirees be aware of? Now, when I'm meeting with individuals and couples for the first time to explore all aspects of their finances as a retirement income planning specialist, as we plan for a retirement that can extend for several decades, several important matters become clear. We are dealing with several risk factors, chief among them being longer life expectancy. Longer life expectancy requires the preservation of principal, more dollars, better tax planning, and a game plan to combat inflation. Now, tonight we have been discussing Social Security. How do I define Social Security as someone who's in the front lines of working with individuals and couples? Well, Social Security is a lifetime income annuity consisting of monthly checks that you cannot outlive. Happily, Social Security even has an annual cost of living adjustment, the cost of living adjustment. Now, Bill made reference to this. A smooth landing into retirement is when the income you enjoy when in retirement is equal or greater than the income that you enjoyed while working. Well, in terms of retiring successfully, it's key that you take longevity risk off the table, the idea of outliving your money. Now, Social Security is a start. It's a guaranteed lifetime monthly income benefit. And if you look at everyone's life, everyone has basic needs and wants. We recommend that people address their needs by adding additional lifetime income annuities to help address the cost of those basic needs. Now, there's going to be a shortfall if we're talking about, and Bill mentioned this, maintaining dignity in retirement. If that smooth landing in retirement is when the income that you have in retirement is equal to what you earned while working, well, that's the penultimate goal, particularly if you're able to keep pace with inflation. So the idea here is to retire successfully, you need to take longevity risk off the table. And why is that? Because longevity risk, the risk of running out of your money during your lifetime, is a multiplier of all the other risks that we face in retirement. You see, the longer you live, the greater the odds of needing long-term health care. The longer you live, the greater the likelihood that you might spend down all your money. The longer you live, the greater the likelihood that your annual health care costs will increase. The longer you live, the greater the likelihood that inflation will rob you of your purchasing power as you get older. Again, what we recommend is you take longevity risk off the table by supplementing Social Security with the purchase of additional guaranteed lifetime income through lifetime income annuities. Now, an annuity is an insurance product offered by various insurance companies. If you're in post-retirement, the specific type of annuity that probably makes the most sense is something that goes by the acronym of a SPIA. That would stand for a single premium immediate annuity. You give a lump sum of money to an insurance company, And in return, within 30 to 60 days, what they can do is start to pay you a lifetime check. And one of the great things about that is, say if you're a married couple, one of the two of you is a spender and the other is a saver. There can be different qualms that take place between couples. That's a general thing that could take place. The great thing about Social Security is you get that check every month so you can spend it. When you create an additional pension for yourself by purchasing an immediate income annuity, well, the idea is every month, once again, you get a paycheck and you can spend that paycheck even if it's an annuity, an individual pension that you created. Now, Bill made reference to the fact that in the 70s and the 80s, there were over 200,000 defined benefit plans. That total now is down to around 50,000 plans. But the whole idea with 50,000 plans is it still covers a large number of people. So if you are one of those lucky people who either is a teacher or a federal worker and enjoys the benefit of a defined benefit pension plan. A defined benefit pension plan means an organization is stipulating the amount of money that you will get throughout your lifetime, as opposed to the onus now being on many consumers who have 401k plans where the company is not being a father figure. In addition, of course, the idea of people working for one company for 40 plus years is something that is pretty much bygone, as many consumers, as I see, will find that they have to work at 10 to 12 different firms, or they're going to change careers 2 or 3 times over a lifetime. So within tonight's time constraints, there are 4 steps to a successful post-retirement. As discussed, covering your basic expenses with guaranteed lifetime income is step 1. Now, step 2 is to optimize the rest of your investment portfolio through the purchase of quality stocks. You're buying ownership in companies that have helped make this country great. Now, I prefer mutual funds or exchange-traded funds, but however you build or maintain a stock portfolio to be held throughout your lifetime, only quality stocks have historically allowed investors to handily outpace inflation over time. Bill, what you mentioned about, say, the S&P 500, if we look at those numbers, had you invested $100,000 in the S&P 500 in April of 1975 and paid taxes on it elsewhere, that $100,000 in April 75 would have grown to over $25 million. That's over 50 years, 100,000 to 25 million. And I consider Social Security and I consider SPIAs, single premium immediate annuities, to be equivalent to bond holdings. Therefore, I recommend for even my clients in their 70s, 80s, and 90s that every other dollar is invested intelligently in the stock market, because Social Security and bond funds, Social Security and annuities take the place of bond funds. You don't need to be in low-performing assets, because bonds are simply not going to accomplish the objective of outpacing inflation. Now, step 3, and we don't have enough time for this tonight, step 3 is to have a plan for long-term care. And I mentioned with regard to longevity risk, the older that an individual and a couple, the older they become, the more likely that one of them is going to need long-term care. And long-term care is an extremely expensive proposition. And step 4, and again, we won't be able to talk about this, if you want to transfer wealth to others, be it children or grandchildren, be it close friends or charities, the most efficient way to do so is through the purchase of permanent life insurance. That might be counterintuitive, but with just pennies on a dollar, what you can do is benefit those people and leave legacies. If a legacy is important to you, the best way to provide a legacy to others is through the purchase of permanent life insurance. When you're saving in a 401k, the idea is those are dollars that should be spent on your own retirement. Those aren't dollars that should be thought to be provided to a successive generation. I have so many instances in the 45 years I've been working as a financial advisor of people on their deathbeds or near their deathbeds who are basically subsisting purely on Social Security. Their children are doctors or lawyers or accountants, high-paid individuals, but that mom is still making sure that she saves a portion of her Social Security to provide for her children who certainly do not need the money. So again, I've gone through a lot in the last few minutes, but I wanted to be respectful of our time constraints. There's state-of-the-art retirement income planning techniques. And in summary, those techniques are the following. You combine the purchase of annuities that have benefits and guarantees. Once you're in retirement, what you're going to do is start taking systematic withdrawals from the stock portfolios that you have accumulated. And one more thing, you need to use what I call time-segmented asset allocation models. That's a mouthful, but it simply means the following. If there are dollars you think you're going to need in the next 1 to 3 years, keep those dollars liquid. If there are dollars that you can afford to put into the future by 4 to 7 years, you might then consider growth or growth in income stock funds. But if we're looking at dollars that you want to save going 7 to 15 years out, there's no reason not to purchase growth or aggressive growth funds because, as I said, historically, stock investments, buying quality companies, think of the companies whose products and services you use every day. You don't have to be an expert, but for example, when I was 18 years of age, I was in college, in my mailbox, I received a gift pack from Gillette. And I said to myself, how is it possible that Gillette would just be able to give everybody here free razors? 60 years have passed, and I'm still using Gillette products. So if you think of the products that you use in your life, that can be one guide for what stocks to purchase. And certainly, just owning an S&P 500, even though I might have a different philosophy than Bill's, the essence is the same. What you want to be able to do is put dollars that are not in Social Security or in additional annuities that you purchase for yourself. You put those dollars purely in stocks. Doesn't matter in your 70s, your 80s, or your 90s. So again, that's the summary in terms of retirement income planning techniques. Use annuities in addition to Social Security, which realistically is an annuity. Purchase annuities on your own. If you have pensions, those are annuities, so you don't need to get an additional annuity. You can make systematic withdrawals from stock portfolios you've accumulated over your lifetime, and then an intelligent use of time-segmented asset allocation models. One last thought is that it is not necessary that you pass away in your 90s with a big stock portfolio. It may look good on a piece of paper, but a lot of this is using the dollars that you've accumulated over your lifetime to have fun. You don't want to have a just in case retirement. You were going to spend this money, but just in case, you better hold on to it. The reality is, it makes sense to use monies you've accumulated over your lifetime to have fun and enjoy life. So before you get too old to enjoy it, make sure you spend these dollars intelligently on yourself. Peggy, back to
Oh,
you.
thank you. That was wonderful. We really appreciate it. Gail is going to take over for now for Q&A. Gail?
Great. Well, thank you to all of our speakers. Your information really was enlightening and quite cogent. At this point, we are going to open the program up to Q&A. When you have questions, if you would click the hand raise button on the reaction section on the bottom of your screen, we will then be able to call on you. We'll start with questions from the public, and then we'll go to CB8 board members. And I'm certain, given all of the marvelous information we've received, that there are going to be a lot of questions. So please feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you.
I see we have a couple of hands raised.
Okay, I'm looking here. Do you see Peggy? Because I don't. Maybe you can.
Yes. Is this Susan Graham? Susan, could you be unmute? Could you please unmute Susan Graham?
I think I'm unmuted. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I actually have questions for 3 people, and I realize that I'll ask one, and then maybe you can circle back around.
Sure.
My first question is for Beth. You say you have 35 million members. That sounds pretty powerful, but I'm not sure and I'm a member. I'm not sure that I see that some of these issues, we think that AARP has a lot more influence on Congress than it appears to have. What is AARP actually doing to try to talk Congress into actually saving Social Security and Medicare?
So as I said before, over 4 million of our members took action last month to push back on the cutbacks to Social Security services. And so we will continue to use that. There are so many ways that our members voice what they think, and we're constantly putting out new policy and more research so that policymakers understand how important it is. We have tens of, actually more than that, of volunteers that go out and meet with their legislators on a regular basis, both at the city, state, and federal level. I'll be on the Hill at the end of the month, knocking on every door. And again, if you're interested in getting more involved, if you go to aarp.org, we send out activist alerts on a regular basis that you can click right through to your legislator and tell them what you think about the issue. We also give talking points so you can be prepared. And if you'd like to volunteer for us, I think that both Peggy and Gail can help you get in touch with me in my email, and I would love to chat with you further if you'd like to get more involved and make your voice heard. I only really talked about Social Security, but there are so many other areas that we've weighed in on. And just recently, what will be launched this summer is Secure Choice here in New York State, which means that 50% of the workers in New York State did not have a 401k available to them in their work, or IRA. And so because of the work that AARP did, it will now be offered through businesses backed by the state of New York. And so the 50% of all the workers in New York who did not have an opportunity to save for their retirement, to contribute pre-tax, will now be able to do that. So I could go on and on. We are fighting with Con Ed right now to stop the increases. It's hard for me to stop and tell you there are so many areas of fraud, scams, consumer protections, affordable housing, accessory dwelling units, financial exploitation for the elderly. We're working right now to get a law passed in Albany that would allow bank tellers to stop a transaction if they think that somebody is could possibly be being scammed. So honestly, there are like hundreds of policy pieces that we're working on all the time. So thank you for asking that question and giving me the opportunity, but I could go on and on and on. And I know that Peggy and Gail will kill me if I don't stop at a certain point.
Well, you do such good work, Beth, and we always appreciate it. If you
I have 2 more questions, but I'll wait until you come around.
If we can do that, we'll come back to
Yes,
you.
I understand. Okay.
Jordan, if you could unmute Rita Popper, please.
Thank you. Every one of the presenters has just been terrific. I just have a question. Is Social Security in a lockbox? But I mean a real lockbox where nobody can get into it. And if Congress or anybody has gotten into it, what do we do to get back that money? I've heard over the years different things. Is Social Security in a lockbox?
Eric, would you like to handle that? If not, how about Beth?
Here I am.
So,
There's Eric. I
yes.
didn't see you.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, Beth.
Yeah.
So it's a good question. A lot of people have it, partly because it's been used as an argument to say that the system is not trustworthy. It doesn't treat you right. The Social Security receives income primarily on a contribution made by working persons, which gives them a right to benefits. It also receives income on taxation of benefits and also on interest on the $2.7 trillion it has. In 1983, we put in some advance funding, knowing that the baby boom was going to retire. So the money is held in what used to be, and may not be now, the safest currency in the world, in bonds, treasury bonds, basically. And it pays interest. I'm forgetting the number, but I think it's about $89 billion this year goes into the system from that. So people believe that. Now, what's hard is we're in such a period of uncertainty. Sometimes with students, I pull out a $10 bill if I can find it. Usually it's $1, but I pull it out and I say, Social Security, does this have the backing? This is money. Why? Because we believe it's there, and it is there. Social Security is funded through ongoing contributions with the expectation and legal obligation to continue doing that when people retire. So I would just say there are things like that, like it's a fraud, or just what I call lies, purposeful lies, like people ages 150 and over are getting benefits. Longest living person ever was in, at least recently, is 126. But Elon Musk did a lot of damage with Mr. Trump's comfort. But these are fundamentally lies that have been used to destabilize the system. There are problems. They need to be addressed. They're real. But I would say the biggest problem is the benefits are modest. The average benefit for retirees is $2,000 a month, less for people with disabilities. That's hugely important, though. That's $24,000 a year. And for many people, it's the only thing they have. I think we're looking at around 40% of people who get Social Security benefits receive 90% or more. 30% receive about 90% or more from Social Security. The system basically does things we can't do by ourselves. And it never has failed to pay benefits. It didn't matter whether you were about to retire right now, we're in the middle of a very difficult period. In theory, the system will continue. It certainly continued itself very well during the Great Recession. Nobody lost their Social Security. They lost jobs, they lost homes, they lost savings, but the Social Security system was very sound. I hope we will restore it to that. I think we will, but it's going to take a battle, and it's really sad to see it pull apart, partly because also this is about a set of values about human dignity, as Bill pointed out, and very important about caring for our neighbors, caring for our parents, working hard, and if you work hard, you got to get some protection for yourself too. Those are fundamental American values that this is built on. People think of it often as a savings account. It's not. It's current generations of workers making contribution for previous generations of workers who made contributions. And you project that out in the future, even if Congress does nothing, Social Security will be paying 81% of earnings, and Congress won't do nothing. We have a lot to do to both protect the system, but then we have a lot to do to expand it. People who retire early, I'll just go into a lot of people, as Bill said, retire early because they have health problems, or I think Jeffrey may have said that. The people have different levels of opportunity to retire. I had a lot. I have good health. I have a good job, which I just left a year ago as a full professor at a good university. And I also have savings. Most Americans don't have that, and it's even less and less today. And much of what we're talking about, much of what the discussion focuses on is the upper middle class and the well-off. My belief is, unless we can get control of the galloping inequality in income and wealth, we're not going to have much left over to also develop the long-term care systems we need, strengthen the Social Security program and benefits. We're in a period that's similar to the 1890s, the robber baron period. And so we're seeing a tax bill or a bill that will greatly reduce taxes and also eliminate Medicaid for maybe as many as 12 million people. It's unconscionable. It is I view it on a moral basis. It's wrong. I can't stand thinking of people not having their care. And we're all at risk. Most people also know Social Security is the basic life insurance we have for our children. It's worth about $850,000 in a term life policy for a young couple with children ages 2 and 3. I'll stop. It might go on forever otherwise.
Eric, thank you so much. Can you please unmute Elaine Walsh?
Thank you. Very informative. Following up on Rita's question, my understanding was that the Social Security funds, as well as Medicare, are not part of the federal budget, that it's a separate entity, and that, as Rita said, the lockbox that has the funds has been invaded by the federal government, but they owe the funds back to the box. I'm using that expression, so that we will continue, so that the feds, when they were short of money, would touch those funds, but they're protected. Am I not correct?
Well, may I jump in and say, yes, you are. I don't know if you are correct that this happens, but it's not correct to say that some funds have been misused in any way.
I didn't say that. I said
No,
they
I know.
borrowed from you.
Yeah, but the borrowing is what pays for many of this. If we didn't loan money through Social Security Social Security didn't borrow money and loan, basically provide protections. Trying to think how to say that. The money that goes into the system is simply related to prior contributions, and what comes out is related to prior earnings that
Right.
contributions were made on. I would say it's not correct at all to say it's just a lockbox, because would you want to take $2.8 trillion and put it under your pillow and not receive any income from it that goes into Social Security? That money creates income into Social Security, and it also lowers our debt, the expense we pay, the percent we pay for the money we borrow as a nation. I'm not saying this is all wonderful, but it's not And I understand how you would reach that conclusion because we've all been told that. The conclusion that it's a lockbox that's stealing money or taking money.
Right, no, I understand. And it's fine to lend it out as long as the government then is paying us back with the interest.
It
And
is.
that's what we need to know, that they can't just say we're going to cut Social Security to help the budget. No, if you cut Social Security, then what you're doing is causing more deficit in the federal
You're also
budget.
stealing, if you're doing it, you're also stealing from the American people who have a right. We've worked for it, they've earned it, and that is, you're very right to be worried about that.
Mm-hmm. Right, but we somehow have to advocate that that money is not part of the federal budget, and they can't use it
Right.
to cut us to think that we're going to save on the budget.
Right.
And we educate our electeds about their ignorance.
That's good. Social Security by law can't borrow.
Right.
And it's about the most sound system we would have until what's been happening.
Yes.
Medicare, by the way, Part B does come out of general revenues, but Part A is a different story. But it's anyway, you're right on a lot of that. And we can respectfully disagree on some too.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And can you unmute Susan, who has two questions, and then we'll go to Judy Snyder.
Okay, my next question is for Jeff. I hear a lot of advertising on the radio against annuities. Don't buy an annuity, they're terrible. And I know that there are different kinds, and I thought maybe you could expand a little bit on what are the annuities that you recommend.
I'm happy to do so. One of the things about the negative advertising about annuities, Ken Fisher comes to mind. He is a proponent against annuities. But I find his position to be ridiculous. I find his TV and radio commercials to be abhorrent. And let's just look, instead of one individual's opinions, about some facts. Statistics came in through LIMRA, which is a monitoring of the life insurance industry. At the first quarter of 2025, consumers purchased over 105 billion, that's billion with a B, not with an M, over $105 billion worth of annuities. And that is the sixth consecutive quarter that consumers purchased over $100 billion worth of annuities. So in spite of what one ill-considered individual might decide is something to avoid, the reality is that it is one of the most popular investments, going back to the days when Babe Ruth was a Yankee and he was playing baseball during the Depression, but he had great advice, and he wound up owning a tremendous number of annuities. Now, there are good annuities and there are bad annuities. There are variable annuities and there are fixed annuities. I was asked to focus on post-retirement. Post-retirement, you're not going to wait 10 or 15 years to first start getting income. So that's why I said a single premium immediate annuity, dollars that would start within 30 or 60 days, makes so much sense. Now, years ago, I had a gentleman in his early 70s, and he was kind of lonely. He had no relatives. He had no one who cared about him or who he cared about, but it made it very easy for me to determine that what he wanted was to purchase an annuity that would start immediately, that would give him lifetime income. He was able to buy this annuity with monies that were not in a qualified plan. And as a result, he benefited by the secret sauce that are contained in all annuities purchased with monies not in a retirement plan, and that has to deal with mortality credits. Long story short here, what I was able to do for my client is get him 18% on his money annually without having to pay any taxes. So how somebody like a Susie Orman or a Ken Fisher could say that annuities are bad when this individual was having about 1 or 2% in his savings account, and he went from that being taxable to getting 18% annually for the remainder of his life without having to pay any taxes for decades. That seems to make more of an impression upon me. Now, if you're in your 40s or 50s and you're not going to retire until age 65 or so, there are annuities that have specific guarantees, things like guaranteed growth and things like guaranteed investment gains that are locked into place. The idea of having guaranteed investments while participating in the stock market, you take the stock market risk out of it. For individuals who are not knowledgeable, it's like being on a bike that has training wheels. The idea is you can participate and own in the stock market without fear of loss. And obviously, the insurance companies that I'm talking about are household name brands with great balance sheets and good rankings. We're not talking about, I'm making up this company, Shifting Sands of Iowa. No, we're talking about the Nationwides, the Prudentials, the Transamerica, the Lincolns, the Jackson National Lifes, the National Integrity Life. All these companies, major companies, some might have sounded to your ear as being companies you know, and others that we in the business know for being incredibly stable and strong. The other thing about annuities and insurance companies, you have to understand in terms of their stability that they're playing both ends against the middle. You never have to worry. I mean, years ago it was thought that, well, if people are living to 100 or 110 and they buy annuities, how will the insurance companies ever be able to make those payments? Well, if people are living to 100 and 110, these same insurance companies have books of business where they have life insurance. So the idea is if people are living longer, these same insurance companies are not paying out death claims. So insurance companies have it covered on both ends. If you don't have time to accumulate the monies you would in a normal life expectancy, they cover the life insurance end. If they're concerned with potentially outliving your money, they have the annuity side of the business. And the actuaries at the insurance companies and the financial experts make sure to match the life insurance with the annuity so they can be extremely secure investments. They may not be FDIC insured, but I got to tell you, if we had a run, the FDIC insurance wouldn't mean anything, whereas life insurance companies are some of the organizations that have built this country. If you think of major buildings, or if you think of colleges and universities and donations that are made by alumni, most of those donations are made through life insurance, and that's what has built all the football stadiums throughout this country. Now, I've gone a little far afield, but the idea is if the question was with regard to what types of annuities, the idea is also a single premium immediate annuity is not a commission product. It's what is called a spread product. The idea is the insurance companies receive dollars in, they invest those dollars, they pay out dollars monthly to the consumers who purchase them. But again, the reality is the facts of the matter rather than opinions is that the American consumer is purchasing over $100 billion worth of annuities every quarter. Depending on your age, your income, your wealth, it may differ between a fixed annuity and it may differ between a variable annuity. It may differ between a single immediate annuity or a deferred annuity. But there's a lot going on in the insurance industry and the annuity business that is extremely positive. The negative rap that insurance companies get is yes, there are instances where someone misinformed purchased an annuity and they might have had a family, but that annuity was structured so that when they passed away, no benefits went to their survivors. Well, you simply don't structure an annuity that way if you have people who are going to be dependent upon that income. What you have is you can have a joint and 100% survivor annuity where if the individual purchasing the annuity passes away, that same amount of monthly income continues for a spouse. And you can have it continued for children as well. So again, I don't mean to hog the limelight, but in terms of answering the question there are annuities that do wonderful things for millions of people in this country.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Susan, you have another question? Why don't you ask that?
I do. I have a two-parter for Eric. Number one is, why doesn't Congress raise the maximum taxable income so that we could, in fact, save the Social Security Fund?
I'm just gonna-
And the second one is, what do you think of the possibility of privatization?
Well, Congress isn't doing anything because honestly, I say, well, in my opinion, it's a do-nothing Congress. And
Well, but it's been going on for a couple of years.
yeah, no, it is. I mean,
yeah.
part of the battle is those who want to pull pieces out of it, change the benefit formula for earnings formula, or want to do it in ways that undermine the system in other ways. They see it as positive, and those are things that are, can be discussed. Could you run the main substance of that
Well,
again?
why are they resisting raising the
Okay.
taxable income?
Yeah.
It's only at what, 126,000, something like that?
About
168.
168.
160. Thank you.
They consider it a tax. I mean, and they aren't interested in tax. They're interested in cutting things. And
That's true.
that's sad because this is what the American people have. I'm listening to this and I really respect what Bill and Jeff have said, but I also listen to it from a vantage point. And I'm not saying I grew up in New York City. I was well off, so I know that area. I know saying, but this is really germane. A lot of the private savings is germane mainly to upper income people. It's also germane to everyone else. We all have to save, and it's important. We're not going to solve the retirement income security process through creating more annuities, in my opinion, or creating basically, I guess it's about privatization. Why are people privatizing? Why are they interested? Because one group that's been very supportive of it over time has been many of the financial managers and companies. This is like opening a wallet to Wall Street if you privatize. And we might as well call it what it is. One can make the case, but the arguments of how we have structured and moved so many people away from the good life in our country are not going to be solved by private savings. And I say that I support it. And I've all sorts of ways I support it. But I think basically there are folks who see a lot of advantage in pulling the system apart, like Elon Musk, who would be delighted. And people they would be salivating to pull the system apart. That's not very nice, but it's what I believe. And I also think it represents the dangerous problem we have of moving more and more people away from a decent life and fewer people in control of more assets and politics. So we have a big job. I think we do it one step at a time. We call our friends. We talk to our grandkids. We let our grandkids talk to us. There's part of this is engaging people in all sorts of ways to push back on things. In terms of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, that's a battle that a lot of the American people will engage in. There are other areas where we might not. But anyway, thank you, Susan. A lot of questions.
Thank you. Can you unmute Judy Snyder, please?
Thank you all. I think this question is for Beth. I'd like to know, who do I write to, or how do I find out what I have in Social Security and what my husband has? What we've put in over the years and what we would be entitled to get. In case it ever stops, I just feel like I'd like to have some paperwork.
So, thankfully, you can still call Social Security, which was in jeopardy for a little while there recently. So yes, you can call Social Security. I recommend that, but you also can open up an account online with Social Security and register your number, etc., and so that you can keep tabs on it on an ongoing basis. So I would recommend doing both of those. I can tell you, a few years ago, I did call in for myself just to find out. They were incredibly helpful. The problem has been the wait time because they've been cutting back on staff, and another 7,000 staff are in jeopardy of losing them right now. But you really can get some great information. You also can go to Social Security, but no guarantee how long you'd be waiting online there. So that's my answer.
But if you go online with Social Security, will they actually tell you
Yes.
all the money you've paid in over
Oh,
the years that you've worked? That's what I'm looking for.
well, they will give you a list of your salary every year that you paid into Social Security. I'm not sure
Okay.
how they do, but yes, I can tell you that when I called in, it was the funniest thing I heard. They said, you had a real jump in your salary in 1978. What happened then? And I went, no idea. I said, I did. He said, yes, your salary went up $10,000 that year. And I just,
I'm going to just
I
add, I
laughed,
think
but at the time, $10,000 was a lot more money than it is today, for sure. So yes,
was-
they can go into it. And I did want to go back to Susan's question, if you all didn't mind, just for
Sure,
a
of
second.
course.
Susan, there are a number of different ways that Congress can come together, that both parties can come together and try to find solutions. Raising the cap is one of them. They're also looking at raising the age. There's a number of different ways. Of course, if they raise the age and you're the one driving the truck and lifting the garbage cans into the truck, it's not going to work for you. But there are ways that there are like 4 or 5 different options, just as when Eric was involved in 1983, they adjusted a number of different things to make it more viable. So yes, there are a number of ways to do that. The problem is somebody will be hurt from almost each one of those options. So it's a question of politicians being brave and looking at it and really, really thinking it out. And I'm glad that Eric talked about the privatization, because that's something that ARP works extremely hard to absolutely beat back. We would never tolerate privatization.
Let me just add a couple things. Retirement age. It's effectively, and I think Bill went through this. I totally agree with him. If you can, it's worth delaying as long as you can. However, in the current environment, it's frightening. And that's why we have a 15% increase, I think, in the numbers of people.
It went up drastically.
Historically, Congress, when we raised the age, but going back a long time, Congress said, let's study it because we know some people are hurt. Well, they studied it. 31% of early retirees were hurt. They didn't have choice. They had health problems, whatever. And of course, what did Congress do over the next 60 years? Nothing. And the same thing is true. Raising the age of eligibility is an 8% benefit cut for each year you raise it. We cut benefits. I say that broadly. But benefits were cut. Most of the 82 the amendments in 1983 involved cuts. One of them was raising the age of eligibility. The commission didn't recommend that, but many of the members did. A lot of different things. So those are just critical to be aware of. And I know you know that, Beth. I'm just adding to that. I want to ask Jeffrey a question, if I could.
Of course.
Jeffrey, what question would you like to be asked? Because I thought your comments were really good and helpful. And I'm feeling bad, like some of us are talking too much.
Well, no, it's perfectly fine. My background, I have
Oh, I
40.
meant Bill, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay,
I wanted to
sorry.
ask, I apologize, Jim. That's not I wanted to ask Bill because he hadn't been asked anything. I'm sorry.
Well, I think we have, and I got to be careful with what I say here, but the audience is like me, a little bit older. So I'm suggesting that for the younger folks, here's what I would do. You know, I'm not saying advocacy is bad. I'm in favor of advocating if you think the system is broken. But I'm saying for younger folks, you need to have a plan. And I don't think just advocating is a plan. So you have to take your own circumstances into account and try to plan the best way you can. And it's difficult, it's not going to be easy, but it can be done. So that's my point. And I realize why I'm not getting any questions, because it's not relevant to most of our audience at this point. But I would say that I think most of the audience, my view, is they're going to get their benefits one way or the other. Like you said, this is not a partisan issue. Some people have said this. I agree. There's no way a Republican or a Democrat is going to touch. It's like a third rail in a railroad. Nobody's going to want to touch that thing because it's going to be a revolt. So Social Security is going to have to be protected. So I don't think the group here, in all due respect, needs to worry that much about getting their benefits. The people who have to really worry are the younger group and your kids, your grandkids. And those are the people who you need to advocate for. Or I think even more importantly, and I tell corporate boards this, you need to educate your participants. If you educate them, you're not going to get sued by them. In my case, in the public case, participants, if they're educated, will be able to save a little bit. And I just want people to have financial literacy, to know what they can achieve in life if they plan a little bit. And as I said, that's what I've been trying to do with my book. I have no agenda. I don't want to sell products. I don't want to sell annuities. In fact, I agree with Jeff. There are some annuities that I think are probably useful, like the single life annuity. That's all I would do. And I've looked at, for executives, all these complicated bells and whistles where it goes flat and you don't lose any money. It's way, way too complicated for anybody to understand. I can't understand them. And my experts in our investment group can't understand them. Nobody can understand them except maybe the insurance companies. So I'm not a proponent of those, but I think something very simple, like a single life annuity, has a place in some people's portfolios. The fees are reasonable. You know what you're going to get. You're not paying excessive fees. And I think so I would comment on that. In terms of questions, I think I don't have tons of questions, but I do think everybody did a terrific job. The questions were great. The presenters were great. I enjoyed being here. And I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to answer a question.
Well, thank you to all the speakers. Peggy, would you like to wrap?
Yeah,
things up?
I have a question. So it's either for Eric or Beth or both. So we're talking about writing to Congress about Social Security, but I'm trying to figure out what exactly people should be asking for. Is it don't close offices, don't fire people, or shore up the system so that we won't have to cut back benefits later on? What if people write to Congress, what should they be seeking? Eric, could you start with that?
Sure. I think firstly, I think it's important to understand the system is not broken at all. We always talk about fixing it. Sometimes I say this, but we talk about fixing Social Security the way we fixed our male dog once. Basically undermining the system. The system works. We need to make changes. But the biggest change we need to do, I believe, is to increase benefits. And we can afford that. And that's the piece that we just don't talk about. We always
All
talk
right,
about,
so how would you frame that in a request to Congress? What would you say?
well, I think right now I'd say the message is keep your hands off of my Social Security and my
Just gonna say.
grandkids' Social Security. That's like,
Sorry, I'll just finish that sentence because I was going to say the same thing. Hands off my Social Security. Ah, there he goes, hands off.
my grandkids' Social Security.
Well, but what does that mean in terms of, so don't do what? Or do what?
Stop trying to ruin the systems. Stop
No,
taking.
but I mean, is it about don't close the offices
It's
or?
open. I think one reason the offices are open, some of them didn't close a lot. And one reason a lot of changes began to be made was there's such an outpour of frustration, especially among older people. It's, politicians in Washington, I've been in Washington, inside of Washington, all the smart people know you have to fix Social Security, you have to cut it. Outside of Washington, doesn't matter who you talk with almost, they love the system and they don't want Congress messing with it at all. Yes, it's going to cost money, but we can afford that. If we can afford another $2 trillion tax giveaway to the rich, we can certainly afford focusing on the middle class and working people.
Well, Jeff, Dr.
Eric is the name.
Eric, Dr. Eric. So, in all due respect, I think, you mentioned the tax cuts, but I think those tax cuts for Social Security, given the percentages you were talking about, would largely favor the lower end of the spectrum, and I think is an increase in Social Security. So, to me, you have to sort of be fair too. That's an increase in Social Security. It's not going to help me, and it's not going to help you, but it's going to help people who are paying some taxes, but they don't, they can't really afford to pay taxes.
You make a really good point. Unfortunately, it's a poison pill. If you don't replace that money that's coming out of Social Security, you just build a deficit. And
well, you build the deficit, but you also help folks who really need this money. It's an increase. That's all I'm saying. If you increase benefits to Social Security participants, what you're doing is increasing the deficit. So you have to find ways to, if you're going to increase by other means, to reduce the benefit. If you eliminate the taxation, and maybe they should just eliminate it on people over 400,000 or something, whatever the rule is that makes sense is fine, but that's an increase. That's an increase in Social Security benefits, I would argue, and a significant increase.
Short term, yes, but you lose about $57 trillion this year, $1 billion that goes into the trust funds if you eliminated the taxation of benefits.
Well, you eliminated for the lower 400,000. The upper people, you don't eliminate, or maybe you make it 200, whatever. But you know.
Sorry.
There is a tax relief, targeted tax relief for seniors that's in the big, bad, or beautiful bill, either one. So I think that goes to your point, Bill. I just wanted to go back to Peggy's point, because Peggy, I think if you're going to call your legislator, and I highly recommend that you do, the basic message is protect and strengthen Social Security.
Thank you.
What I would say.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. That's so helpful.
Well, also pass legislation that increases Social Security. I mean, if you want to increase the benefits,
Yeah.
maybe
Again,
bigger
it goes-
colas, whatever. But
Again, this goes back to 2034. As Eric said, and as I said, if something is not done, Social Security will only be paying out either 80 or 81% of what people are, the benefits they're supposed to get. So we have a runway right now, right?
so
Runway gets shorter every year. And so Congress has got to come together, and they've got to figure this out. That's the
well,
nobody wants a 20% pay cut on their Social Security.
Well, I agree, but you can't have it both ways. You
No,
can't
that's why I'm
increase
saying there are
benefits
solutions.
and decrease the deficit at the same time. You have to kind of, maybe you cut it for the well. You can't do it both ways. Is all I'm saying.
I'm not getting in the middle of that, but
And
we've
I'm
got a
not gonna
runway to
start.
fix it. They need to fix it. They need to secure it, and they need to strengthen it.
Thank you, Beth. We have one last question from Rita Popper.
Do we need a letter that we send out to our elected officials with what we have learned here? The letter.
Again, I hate to keep pushing AARP, but I'm telling you, go to aarp.org and put in Social Security or Protect Social Security in the search box, and it will give you actions that you can take. And I really highly recommend you sign up for those alerts, because that's how we got those 4 million actions in place that made them not do the cuts to the telephone customer service, which is incredibly important.
It helps.
That's
I
terrific.
on a national basis, but what I was talking to was on a city and state basis, that the community board deals with. And I don't know whether we need, I'm a member of the public, so whether you need a motion to do this letter or whatever. I'm just.
Do you want a letter, or are you talking about a resolution?
Whatever you think is going to be more effective.
Even phone calls, because they count the number of
It's the number of phone
Calls, letters,
come
and
in on
phone
an
calls are
issue.
more
phone calls,
responsive. than
emails,
questions.
and letters.
Okay.
It's the direct action to your legislator. And again, as I said, if you know people in other states where their representative might have a different view, that you really want to move their view, educating other people around the country so that they take those personal actions, there's nothing more valuable than that.
AARP is doing a great job. I just wanted, as the community board is a local board.
Yeah.
And we wanted to know, I wanted to know if it would be proper to address our local elected officials and let them know how we feel.
Rita, if the committee agrees, we could definitely go on to the AARP website, make sure we have correct talking points, and then do a letter to all of our electeds that represent our district. There's no reason we can't do that as long as the committee agrees. Is there any objection from any?
Yeah, and this letter would say what?
Well,
Just what Beth has said, that we need support for, or is there something more specific that we would ask for?
There are some other things that could be done, like asking legislators to pass a bill, a proclamation that this is state legislatures, that their Social Security benefits, their constituents' benefits should not be touched. Getting states to weigh in on this is helpful. Social Security, it's a major impact on the economy, lots of different things, but there are a lot of ways to go at it. I think it's great that Rita has this question of what to do. And I think we all do. Doing is the most important part of it.
Yeah, and Rita, and to Eric's point, Rita, and Eric's so right, and you're so right. Just in New York State alone, it's a 79.3 billion payments into the state economy because of Social Security,
Mm-hmm.
79.3 billion.
I have to advertise the organization I co-founded, which is extremely active. It's called Social Security Works. You'll hear it at socialsecurityworks.org. It has a large engaged grouping, the email list, whatever, is well over 1 million people now. But it's an advocacy organization composed of disability groups, veterans groups, a lot of different things, and it has tremendous information on it. So
Right.
pretending I'm not taking anything away from
I-
ARP,
Well,
but I
we'll
would
look
be
at
remiss
both.
if I didn't say Social Security Works is a pretty awesome organization, and the people who run it, I'm now not involved in running it, but they're really pretty terrific. Most of them are younger, and it's good to have a new generation.
Okay, well, I guess we will endeavor to send a letter to state people, right? And I guess we could do it through the ARP website. Is that correct, Beth?
I think you can get some talking points from it.
Okay.
And I recommend you sign up to get our advocacy alerts, because
Okay.
if there are more threats to Social Security, you're going to hear about it there, and actions that people can take immediately at that time.
You might want to get a
Okay.
copy of the resolution that the CARA, the California Alliance of Retired Americans, has been pushing on the California legislature. It's a resolution calling for protecting, exactly what I've said, protecting and expanding and keeping your hands off of Social Security. It's said more politely than that, but
Okay.
there's a very well-written resolution.
Okay, terrific. Well, I think that's all the questions, and Gail and I want to thank you panelists so much for your excellent presentations. Very informative, very lively. We've had a great discussion, and I want to thank all of our audience for attending tonight. And Gerald, thank you very much to everyone who participated. This has been terrific. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very
And
much,
good-
everybody. Great
Yeah.
job.
Thank you, and you too, and good night.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Take care all.